Jacob Vincent grew up in Tasmania in a musical family and released his debut EP, Cold and Blue, in 2020. He now lives in Brisbane. Last year, he was a grand finalist in Toyota Star Maker, and since then, he's been working on his debut album with the first single, What Would I Say, released this month. And we're going to talk about it. Hello, Jacob.
Hi, Sophie. Thanks for having me. Your podcast is in my rotation weekly, so I probably won't listen to this one. But
you may have, if it just comes up in the rotation, you may end up listening to it. But thank you very much for listening. It's always reassuring to know someone's out there. But I'm going to take you back into your family history and ask about your grandfather, because at a certain point you discovered that he had been in a group called the Singing Kettles. At the time you found that out, did you think it was cool?
I always thought it was cool because I had like one of their 7-inch sort of singles from, it must have been about 1970, and it was sitting on my bookcase from the day, like first day I can remember. And it had, I think it was like Airmail to Heaven, which was an old song. I can't think who it's by. And it had Little Green Valley, which is like a deep cut on that iconic Marty Robbins album.
Right.
And they're just like the first songs I remember sort of hearing. And then my first Tamworth was when they were inducted into the Royal Renown. So even though Max had passed away even sort of long before me, I think he passed away in 71. He was about 22 years old, like just so young. But the two surviving brothers had kept making records. And my first memory is like sitting there eating an icy pole, and they're picking guitars out on the back deck in the middle of Tamworth Country Music Festival. So
right.
I had an idea, but it's only been since, I guess, diving into their records later in life that I've really and just hearing stories of people that have still know of them now, I guess, that you realize their impact.
Mm-hmm. So you say it was your grandfather who died when he was 22?
Yeah, so he was the youngest brother. I think they'd done about 10 years of recording. Like he was about 12 years old when they first started releasing. And then like they did a tour of Vietnam playing the troops. They were sort of just about to really break through. I think they had like a Buck Owens tour sort of booked to open up for. But he passed away from an asthma attack after a gig. Just the three brothers in the car. And the brothers kept going, and they still did like great things and collaborated with so many people. But I guess it wasn't really until Dad started playing music that our part of the family got back in the fold a bit. And they re-recorded a couple of songs with Dad singing with them and stuff. So I had a little bit of an idea, but I'm older now than he ever sort of was. So yeah, crazy story, I guess.
Well, yeah, because 22 is so young, but also obviously he had at least one child by then. Otherwise, you wouldn't exist.
Yeah, Nan was pregnant with Dad's sister as well. So it was just a sign of the times, I guess. You know, people were having families young, but they'd uprooted their life and moved from sort of rural Tasmania to Tamworth with Hadley Records when Eric and Hillary Scott, who have been sort of custodians of the Hall of Fame in town for a long time, they set up a studio there and made a lot of great records.
So your Tamworth lineage runs quite deep then.
Yeah, Dad was born there. So I think it's funny, like obviously Tassie's not a rugby league state at all, but I don't know who Dad goes for now that we're living in Queensland. And I still prefer the AFL.
Yeah. So I did see a photo of you on your social media of you in a cowboy hat when you were a very young person. At least I think it was you. So was that taken in Tamworth?
No, I think that was at home. I think like my first concert was like West Point Casino circa 2003. It's probably like Lee Kernaghan or maybe Keith Urban, right? One of those two. And yeah, I just got the bug early. Like I was in that CD era, so it was so much Garth Brooks. Like Dad had all the CDs. Everyone had all the CDs.
Yeah. So you mentioned that your father was a musician. Now, from what I understand, he was playing a lot of gigs, but in his younger years, sort of like around university years.
Yeah, I don't know if it was like too much tequila or just I came along. I'm not sure what slowed that down, but he's still a better guitar player than like I will ever be. Just once I get him to dust off the guitar and get it out again. But he's such a music lover, and like, he was all about Jimmy Buffett and the Eagles and those guys. So that 70s sort of styling, I guess, kind of rubbed off on me a bit, but it was always just a good song. And he said, like all these songs, you know, Eagles records, so many layers, so many guitars, but he always like ingrained in me that those songs were still just as good and impactful when it was just, you know, Don Henley and his guitar or whatever it was. So I've always sort of tried to write by that ethos. Yeah.
Well, it also means, of course, that you can take your songs anywhere. You don't need a band if it's just you and a guitar, and you know the songs will stand up. It doesn't matter where you're playing.
Yeah, I think I mean, I love rocking out as much as the next person. I mean, who doesn't want to have, you know, a bunch of guitars lying around and be loud and noisy? But yeah, I've loved Neil Young, Springsteen, Tom Petty, Paul Kelly. And those guys have always been able to straddle that line throughout their career, you know. So I think it just gives you options, and any songs on the table then.
Absolutely. So when did you start playing guitar or singing, whichever came first?
I was probably singing from the day I came out. I don't know if it was very, very good, but I remember like little, like dad sort of jamming along and me making up songs about, you know, cats and clouds and all the rest, pretty young. And they got me into piano lessons because they were like, there was a guitar sitting there, but they were like, oh, you should probably try to understand this. I gave that away as sort of junior sport kicked in and took over a lot of time. But I did do singing lessons, and we used to do like corporate gigs as the characters from Snoopy and the Peanuts and sing all the songs. So I was like cast as Charlie Brown.
When you say we used to do it, like who else was with you doing this?
Whatever the sort of production company was that I was doing the singing lessons through, they just kind of cast a few of us as various Peanuts members. Yeah, I still remember some of those songs, and you know, you do like the carols at the end of the year and things like that. So I could always kind of sing, but the guitar came later on. I think I went to like one of my first sort of gigs without mum and dad.
Right.
I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And then just try to figure out the chords straight away. There was never any like figuring it out one bit by one bit. It was always sort of put it in your own style, and yeah, and then it was writing songs pretty quickly because I couldn't figure out half the songs or make them sound like the record.
Well, it is a hard thing to do, and sometimes I wonder if learning an instrument like piano, or maybe particularly piano, where you obviously are learning to read music and you have to do all those exercises and all those sorts of things, whether it can preclude you from being able to pick out chords by ear for things, because it's like that part of your brain's been given over to reading music.
Yeah, I mean, I probably didn't stick with it long enough for that to get in.
Well, it's obviously a good thing, because then you could work out songs. Yeah.
But it's great now. Like I play covers for a living, and I can't play any of those sort of note for note. I got to put them in my own key anyway, just to survive and play the big repertoire. But after sort of 20 hours of bashing out songs on the guitar, like we've got an upright piano that we got out of one of my share housemates sort of storage cupboards, and that's like a saving grace on a Monday morning, because you still can play music, but it's not what you've been doing all weekend. So I'm grateful for the piano lessons, because now I can use that just to sit down and have a little noodle, and your brain and your hands go somewhere different than those sort of ingrained patterns that you have on the guitar.
Yeah, right. So when did you start writing songs?
There might have been some early on that I tried to figure out, but I guess I was bashing around with mates sort of in a band. You know, you get your first sort of band together, and once again, quickly I realized we couldn't sort of play all the all the songs we wanted to, so I had to write some. But I guess I was up in. I kind of realized that I had a bit of a bug for it. I was on like an altitude training camp for swimming up in Thredbo, and I was like, can I have an extra bag? Because I wouldn't mind bringing a guitar. And I was just going sort of sitting by the creek, almost in the middle of winter, like there was snow around, and starting to pick out songs, because I needed to be somewhere where no one could hear my terrible ideas in their infancy. And that's kind of where the first songs were born that I would say were Jacob Vincent songs, where I was kind of writing it for myself. And there was no grand plan at that point other than just to, I don't know, process some stuff, or even so sometimes the song's just something that some words that rhyme well and sound cool.
Yeah, and it's valid to put those together, because sometimes it's just to get stuff out of your mind, and then it frees the way for another song to come through.
Yeah, definitely.
So you just mentioned altitude training in Thredbo. Now, this is something that is not done by the amateur swimmer. This is something that is done by the competitive swimmer who is about to head to a competition that's in a place that is at altitude, I would imagine.
I think the altitude is more just to restrict like the amount of oxygen. So if you can perform under that extra bit of stress, I guess, to your cardiovascular system, it should be easier when you come back. But I was swimming 1,500 meters, so there's no easy way to go about it. Yeah.
No, but also as I said, it's not for an amateur swimmer. So you were doing some competitive swimming at this stage. At what age did you start doing that?
Oh, so yeah, I think I went to my first swimming carnival in year 3, and I just touched out the next kid on the wall, and I was like, not next. Like I was like, there's a risk that next year I won't be the first hand on the wall. And it was right around like Beijing Olympics, I think. So it was just what was on the telly. And you're that 8-9 years old. And Phelps won 8 gold medals or whatever. And I was like, he's the man. Right. And just started putting so many hours into it. But I loved it. And I still do love swimming now. It is such a time. Like, yeah, it's 40 hours a week, and you can't escape it. But it put me in good stead, and it was great to be in some high performance environments. Yeah.
1,500 meters is a commitment as an event, because yes, it is the longest of any of the distances. And I'm wondering if to swim that distance, you kind of have to hook into Zen and the art of swimming, because it's a long time to be in the pool. And I would imagine it's easy to get distracted even in the middle of a race, because you have all those laps to swim. Yeah,
definitely. Like the middle of the race is where you find your mind wander, when the pain starts to really hit. But I was so fortunate when I moved from Tassie to the Gold Coast. I swam in the squad with this guy by the name of Dennis Cottrell, who he's had an Olympic sort of representative in every event in the pool, but he'd also coached Grant Hackett, and when I moved up was right when Grant sort of made a bit of a comeback there to push for Rio Olympics. So I mean, the year I was born, he was sort of winning gold medals in world champs. Or then there was Sydney Olympics just after, and so he'd always been my idol. And then all of a sudden, I'm training with him. So that was great. So he wasn't swimming 1,500 at that time, but like that sort of experience, it's like anyone, I guess. It became a bit of mentorship, and we also had the Chinese sort of world record holder Sun Yang there. So yeah, it was a good school to sort of be in. But yeah, Zen and the art of swimming is definitely how Dennis would put it. I think the way he coached was a bit of an art form. Yeah, for sure.
Well, and choosing that event does indicate that you have a sort of nature where you're prepared to to not go for a short result, right? Like, I don't think this is where it might apply to being an artist as well. It's knowing that the wins aren't necessarily going to come right away, that you have to stick with it, that you have to understand that not every song you write is going to be a winner, and that maybe you have to go through a whole lot of songs just to find one that's going to work, and then hold your nerve to the end of the process, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it definitely ingrained in me that like you always have a crack. Doesn't matter how you feel when you wake up that morning, like you just got to show up. And I think when I first finished swimming and I did that first EP, it was like, I've got a bunch of songs, I've got to do something with them. I've at least got to start the wheels turning. So jumped in the studio down at Casey Chambers' place with Brandon Dodd for that. And I didn't know anything really about being in the studio at that point in time. Maybe even some of the songs were a little bit undercooked. Like we did an album's worth of material in a week. And it was all like the song Emily's like the live vocal when I was sitting in the control room and we played everything live and real minimal overdubs. But I went away from that experience, I guess, going, oh my God, there's so much to learn. Like not so much about even songwriting, because I knew that was always going to be an evolving thing, but I guess being able to communicate the sounds that you like, or be able to go back and refine the arrangement of something. So yeah, I think it held me in good stead to then go, all right, there's like not a university degree, because I think it's something you got to figure out yourself, you know, being a subjective thing as art, but there was so much to learn. So I kind of spent the last 3 or 4 years just whittling away at songs, but just sort of finding those mentors and those experiences to, I guess, prepare myself to then sort of go and record an album now, because that was always the goal. It wasn't, I knew my music wouldn't be singles or particularly pop sensible. It was always just going to be like, I want people to get to know me. I want to tell a story for 40 minutes or 50 minutes or however long it is. Yeah.
Interesting, because that does say a lot about, yes, how you conceive of what you're doing as a long arc project. Basically, it's not it's obviously the songs are short arcs within it, but your intention is to have this longer body of work to convey the full story. So I'm wondering, therefore, when you started to write songs, or even maybe before that, when you're at school, were you writing stories in English class, for example, and what sort of writer might you have been then?
Maybe not English class, because I always kind of didn't like being told what to write about or how long it should be or anything. But any project that came along that I got really engaged in, that was all I was sort of just hell-bent on doing for that period of time. I don't know whether it was always particularly creative, but like it was stories, or when with the context of someone's history and personality. Like I remember doing a massive project on Martin Luther King Jr. that I sort of almost turned into like a small book, but I was just engrossed by, I guess, the time and place and what he stood for, and things like that. Yeah, if I get the bug for it, there's it'll I could just be enwrapped in it for a couple of weeks or whatever it is. Yeah.
Right. So you said the intention was always to make an album, but you also said you recorded an album's worth of material with Brandon Dodd. So you obviously didn't release an album at that stage. Was it just that you felt that the 4 songs that you had on the EP were representative of what you wanted to say then, and the rest could be let go?
Yeah, I think I don't know whether they were let go. I think it just became. I just felt like what I brought to the project wasn't quite where I wanted it to be. Okay. Like it was such a good experience working with Brandon, and then, like, and he was so sort of graceful in letting me be a little bit I guess just like a horse bolting in a gate and just going like, this is how I want to do it, you know, rather than doing it all to a click track and all that stuff, and sort of keeping that charm. So I'm very proud of like the vibe that we captured. But I guess like one of the songs that's on the album is one that didn't make the cut from those sessions. But it's one that I kind of wrote the morning and we just laid it down in the studio that day. So that one's hung around for 4 or 5 years now. And working with Shane Nicholson on the album, like he's given it a bit of a new lease of life, but it's one that I've played at just about every set ever since. Right. So it's one that I really liked. And then I guess the other thing's just been developing what I would consider a Jacob Vincent song, or not which really is who Jacob Vincent is, I guess. But just trying to refine it and make it as good as possible. Yeah.
Which is always a worthwhile goal. Now, I do want to ask about one song on the EP, which is Cold and Blue. Yeah. That is a really strong song lyrically and vocally. Yeah. And I can't think of a song I've heard like it, actually, because it's so visceral in so many ways. So I'm wondering what the background to that story is, if you're prepared to talk about it.
Yeah. I'm probably gonna sort of pull the curtain back too much, but I heard Jason Isbell's Elephant and I was like, that is the saddest song ever. So I guess after hearing a few stories of people in that situation, and I guess you can with songs you can always kind of blend things from a couple of different stories. So it was just a couple of different stories I guess I'd heard, and I guess that sort of raw sound, I guess, was the inspiration. But I remember, I'll sort of always remember the night we cut that. It was like candlelit studio and just me and Brandon in a room playing the song 4 or 5 times, and we just choose the one we like best, you know, of that. Which I guess was sort of the ethos of the project. But I'm glad you liked it. It's one that I don't play that much anymore. It was just it was a good songwriting exercise, I guess. And like super happy with the vibe I captured on that. But I guess I just haven't, sometimes you just don't want to go to that place. And I guess being a little bit further removed from it than maybe the performance might make you believe. I guess a lot of the songs that I'm playing now are like very sort of autobiographical and firmly rooted in my life. So I guess it just hasn't found a space in the set lately.
Yeah. And I think it's, I didn't necessarily presume that it was a story that had happened to you, but more how vividly it's depicted as a story in the song, and because there's so much in it. So I do encourage people to go and have a listen to it. But I'm going to move on to your new single, which is What Would I Say? And we're speaking in April, and in part it's a song for Anzac Day, and you wrote it with poet Colin Defries. How did that come about?
Yeah, we're out at this awesome place outside of Tamworth called the DAG in Nundle that's birthed like so many amazing songs. But in general, it's just like an inspiring place because you're around, like no one's there by mistake. You know, it's this, it's down the dirt road out of Nundle, and there's no reception there. So you're just around good people that are all brought there by, I guess, wanting to write a good song or tell a story, or and no one really has any preconceived notion of doing anything with those songs either. You know, like that's what I kind of love about it. There's people there that, like Colin, that aren't quote unquote singer-songwriters. You know, they might write songs and lend a lot of lyrics to things, and he does all the time. But he sort of sidled up to me early in the retreat and was like, you're one of the only sort of young blokes here. Like, I've got this poem that I think could use a younger perspective. And I said, yep, sweet, we'll book it in, you know. Yeah, it sounds very Nashville, but it's not at all out there. They ring the bell when it's dinner time. Yeah. But yeah, we sat down and I just sort of picked along the first few chords and tried to sort of sight read it and sing along with it. and those chords sort of stuck. We found a chorus amongst his verses, and then he was really, really graceful in just being sort of like, I just want this story to be told. And I think you've kind of got the best. I thought he had the best angle on that sort of topic that I'd heard in a while. Like, it hadn't been done that way before. I guess letting your guard down and saying, what, I'm not a digger, but I guess what would I say? So I was just, I was really taken by the angle, and he let me just put it in sort of my own vernacular and let it flow naturally. And that's sort of the way I write a lot of songs, is you get it all down there, and then I spend many a night kind of just recording and listening back to myself, or write a massive sort of bunch of lyrics and then see how they sing once you've got those ideas on paper.
So it is, yes, a song about what would you say to a digger, and specifically, well, at least going off the music video, a World War I digger. Has Anzac Day been something that's meant a lot to you in the past?
I think it's one of my like core early memories again, and I think that's like a bit of a theme in my song, I guess, or stories that I'm drawn towards is a bit of nostalgia. And I think it was so early on that I remember going to dawn service with my family, and it's such a sensory experience, like the silence, the last post. So I think those things really do stick with you. And then I guess I've just always wanted to tell stories in a unique way, a way I haven't heard before, that's maybe not as cliche. And it just at first reading of it, it stuck with me, and I knew I wanted to sort of see it through from there. I don't sort of have any family with military background beyond my grandfather sort of going to Vietnam when it was sort of a live scenario. But growing up in Hobart, the cenotaph is really the center of the city. It's the oldest one in Australia, so I sort of drive past it every day, and it's always been something that I guess I've had empathy towards.
I didn't realize that the oldest cenotaph in Australia was in Hobart. I have learned something new. But to look at other parts of your career, so you released the EP in 2020. You won Best of the Buskers at the Tamworth Country Music Festival in 2022. Now, I'm wondering if you remember your busking spot that year.
I was outside. I was outside Best and Less, and the last 2 years I've gone back and done some busking, because I do think it is, I'm still kind of fresh to that whole festival scenario. I do think it is it is a bit of a rite of passage, and I think I'd be remiss to sort of get that accolade and still not go back and sew back into that. So I was outside Best and Less, and I busked every day, and even the day that the Buskers finale was on, I went back and busked because I had to get fuel money to get home, But you just meet great people there, and some of my best friends sort of in the industry are like people that I've busked across from, or even now, half the time, like this past festival, I didn't even really have to set up any gear. It was great. I just had friends that were busking and wanted me to have a jam with them. So I mean, you look after each other down there, and I think it is really ground zero for country music in our country.
But you did make quick work of things, because the following year, in 2023, in fact, it wasn't even a full year later, because the 2022 festival was in April. So by 2023, in January, you were in Starker. So you did not muck around with that.
No,
that was pretty quick.
I didn't put out any music or anything either. So like, grateful they took a chance on me. And I got to do the opening concert that year as well. So it was a really good taste of sitting in with the house band and going through all those, I guess, more official communications with music directors and things like that. And like Sam Hawksley and Cheryl Brown, Tom Inglis were like good at holding my hand through all those all those things, and just backed me to kind of do my thing. Yeah, I've never sort of wanted to be the loudest person, but yeah, it was such a good experience, and opened up a lot of more connections, mainly for sort of mentoring. I mean, it was great. I found a lot of people that were willing to come along to the gigs, and even 12 months later, did a show with Kelly Cork at this past festival that we sold out at the press, which was just amazing, because to sell tickets in Tamworth, like, you can never take for granted. So yeah, it's held me in good stead, and all the other people that sort of participated last year, like, they're doing like great things. Like, you look at what Robbie's done the last couple of weeks with his new song. I mean, Lauren was such a good ambassador for it in general. Denver, Finn, and all the others. Like, yeah, it's just a good group to be a part of.
Yeah. I think, yes, every year it's such a strong lineup, but I never know how the judges choose, actually, because any one of the artists in the finals could be the winner, if you know what I mean. And I don't mean that in a trite way.
Yeah. No, I agree. We were sitting back there going, "Oh man, you sound so good. Oh, she sounds so good." Like, which is what you want in that scenario, I think. Yeah,
absolutely. Now, you mentioned that you're working with Shane Nicholson on your new music, and this will be for the new album, which will be out next year, I believe. But you are also a producer, from what I understand. So I'm wondering why you decided not to produce your own album. Look, I can understand why you'd want to go with Shane, but given that you have the capability of producing your own music, why did you choose to work with a different producer?
Well, my bedroom studio's affectionately named I think I can say it, Shithouse Studios. So it says it on the door. And it's really fun, sort of recording other people's music. But I do think you need those filters in sort of music creation, whether that be from mixing to mastering, or something like Shane's brought a lot of his impact is invaluable. Because he has that songwriter sensibility, he understands what you're going for completely. And honestly, I'm not too confident that I could get anywhere near it. But it's good to have that little bit of extra understanding. But yeah, having those filters is really important, just to know you're on the right path. Like, a lot of my songs in the last couple of years, I also flicked past Kevin Bennett, just because he gives me like unabashed sort of feedback. He knows when to leave something and when something can be better. And always, yeah, he just comes from such a good place. And same with Shane. Like, they're both able to just go, "What, have you thought about tweaking this, or have you thought about tweaking that?" And yeah, I mean, I get to look over Shane's shoulder and see what he's doing technically. So, sorry, Shane, but I'm watching.
But also, just to bring it back to the swimming, I mean, you're talking about people giving you advice there, and it's not necessarily, I mean, it's criticism, and it's constructive criticism, but that's not always easy to take. But as a swimmer, of course, you had a coach giving you constructive criticism the whole time. So I wonder if that made you appreciate that it is usually in your best interest to pay attention to what those experts are saying, rather than taking it personally and thinking, I've failed.
Yeah, no, I think like, especially with KB in those sort of early stages, and I've leaned on Jen Myers as well a bit. Like, they only want the best for me, they only want the best for my songs. And the friendship that I've got with them, like, I know that. So yeah, I can take all that on the chin. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and Jen Myers is a phenomenal artist. So yeah. And also, obviously, KB, Shane, you're in extremely good hands there, Jacob.
Yeah.
So what would I say is out now? I would imagine, given that you've been recording with Shane, you have some other songs queued as singles.
Yeah, we've got just the last sessions to wrap things up and put a bow on things in a couple of weeks. But yeah, as it's kind of been written as an album, I don't know what the singles will be. Maybe something a little bit lighter for the next one. But just, yeah, 3 or 4 over the next year, and then an album. And I'm sort of planning on getting it. I listen to so much vinyl, so
Right.
I mean, hence I'll probably do a small pressing and stuff. Like that's kind of my goal, you know, like that's my benchmark, you know, for me personally. And if other people like it, that'd be great too. But
I think vinyl is the way to go. A lot of people are buying it these days.
Yeah, I think people are. I mean, country music's great for people sort of still getting out and purchasing physical, you know, like and how good is it to hold that physical in your hands, and even a CD to open it up and read the credits and the liner notes. Like, I love it. I think it's yeah, I've heard someone say the other day, like they go in the news agency to like smell the newspaper still, and I I think it's great that you can still listen to music sort of in the track listing that's intended. So yeah, looking forward to wrapping all that up.
I certainly miss liner notes. Yes, so streaming is not the same thing at all. However, people can stream your single, and they'll be able to stream your upcoming singles, and then look forward to vinyl, maybe a CD when the album comes out next year. Jacob, it's been so interesting to talk to you. I look forward to whatever you're going to release next. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Sophie.